Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Council of Time. Aren't you guys encouraged as to what's taking place in Texas? To date, they have a lot of money pouring in. Lots of money pouring in. That's awesome. It's going to be a long recovery process for them. But that seems to be taken care of. Quite a bit is being taken care of, and I know the process is going to be long and arduous. Again, it's good for each group to focus on those that they do know. And it will be a long and arduous process. Last time during, what was that, Katrina, I believe it was, they had a debate over a $10 billion financial injection. This one will likely take a lot more. And because the floodwaters are going to take a few days to recede. So, it's so encouraging that people are working together. It's also, there's another part of this that's not so encouraging, is that often when problems are over, people go back to business as usual. But it is encouraging to see how people react and who's reacting. In other words, who's doing the right thing. You have newscasters, people who are not talking politics, and when they don't talk politics, their language is very different. Have you guys noticed that? They're not talking about contentious subjects. Their language is very different. But as soon as you introduce politics, where the money should go, this, that, and the other, you all know it's going to begin again. So it'd be good for us to refine ourselves in a respect that we maintain a sense of normalcy about us during these things. And it's trickling down. Somebody is listening to something. People are listening. And there are a lot of people, certainly in alternative media, who are having an impact on the populace. More than they know, they're having an impact on the populace. There are many people listening to alternative sources and saying about Christian views because it's not restrictive in these type forums. Not as much as it is on sanctioned forums. Not as restrictive. One thing we haven't heard about in a long time is CERN. I'm going to talk to you guys about just one small fact about CERN. Some things that they're doing. Not going off the deep end, not going into detail or anything, but to give you a hint of something. Now we know in prophecy, and I'm going to be focusing on a few things concerning prophecy because of how our brains work. And there's something you might want to see. You know, without a hormonal balance in your body, you can and will go a bit bonkers. How many of you know that? A lot of nurses understand this, and some women understand this. Some men do understand this also, that without a proper hormonal balance, you tend to go off the rails, so to speak, right? You become irritated, agitated. And it really is not, it has nothing to do with your soul, but it has to do with the dissatisfaction of your flesh and the irritation of the flesh. Well, with the change in the magnetosphere, something can alter in the way people operate, and it's increasing. Right? Now, I'm going to give you one piece that is very prophetic. You ready for this? As these changes continue, you're going to notice those folks who have been around you in greater and greater points of desperation. Right? A type of desperate irritation. Their character will begin to slightly change, and they may become aggressive. You're going to have to deal with people who are becoming more and more aggressive than usual. All right? More and more aggressive. That means all of us are going to have to really maintain ourselves around folk. Right? I mean, really maintain yourselves. It's going to task you out to maintain yourselves. Some of you may even find yourself running away from people just so you won't say anything, because they're going to get to points of view, to parts of you, and points of view that you just can't deny. I've noticed that in professional environments, and a lot of people are, though, even though it's a beautiful thing happening in the world, people are losing it left and right, like a disease that nobody has named. A lot of that is due to changes in the atmosphere, lots of changes in the atmosphere, and some changes in the gravitational let's just say, some of the gravitational waves of Earth. Right? That's something that's not usually talked about, is gravitational waves and the effect it can have upon the human brain. Nevertheless, it does have an effect upon the human brain to a big degree. And so, folks, you got to get yourselves ready for this. Tonight we're going to go over some prophecy that has to do with not the happenings in the world so much as it has to do with people and the change in people, so that you can understand what's happening. I'm going to give you some pointers too about dealing with individuals like that, so that when you begin to see these things, you'll be able to handle them a little better. Okay? Just a little better. So, get yourselves ready, because we're going to go over this. Of course, we have an interruption. Can you believe that? Interruptions. It's busy. It's what it is. It's very busy. Folks, just give me about 9 minutes and 15 seconds, and I'll be back, and we're going to discuss some of these things, okay? Because the chemical nature of the body and the brain is going to change in a lot of people. And I certainly do hope you realize what that implies. And you really have to anchor yourselves. You're going to have to anchor yourselves to deal with these folks, and that aggression factor is going to become, well, it's going over the top. Folks, I'll be right back. Please forgive me for this small interruption. I'm going to take care of this. I'll be right back. Folks, I want you to do me a favor while I'm setting something up. Make sure you guys keep loving your hearts. Don't let love go. It's going to be tested. Some people are saying, well, why is he talking about this? Darkness is hovering. When that darkness is pointed out for being what it is, not by us, but it's going to be pointed out, you're going to see an uproar that you've never seen before in people. In people. And it is something, too, because have you guys noticed the type of transition is taking place with a lot of folks who truly do love the Lord? And that through your changes, every single chain broken in your lives is desperately trying to come back. Old things are trying to come back. Old people are trying to come back. And it's because Satan gets very desperate right before deliverance. And if he can have you corrupt yourself prior to that deliverance, you'll be sitting through the same place you were last time, through an entire cycle. He does this all the time. You see, before breakthrough, there's always a type of test by him to see if he can prod you, poke and prod you into certain directions. So what he does is he tries to make you fail. He will touch every exposed nerve that you have, right? To try and make you corrupt yourselves. Jesus spoke to us saying, don't do this, because it's about to turn spiritual, but with manifestations. And he often does this. The accusations are no longer enough. So he's coordinating. He will coordinate through every weak vessel around you. Listen to me. If you so much as have 1 hour of weakness, 1 minute of weakness, 1 moment of weakness, do you not know that Satan can use you against somebody else? It only takes 1 moment of weakness. When they were praying with Christ, Jesus said something when they were praying with you. He said, you can't pray with me for 1 hour. Don't you know that Satan desires you? And I often ponder that. And it doesn't mean that if you don't pray, Satan's going to get you, right? His emphasis was not only praying, but staying awake. Jesus was still teaching in that hour, because right before he went to the cross, that night when they were praying, what happened to Christ? First you heard him say, Father, if it is possible, take this cup from me. Nevertheless, thy will be done. Right? You heard him say that. What is that? That is Satan prodding and poking these nerves that we have. Exploiting our minds, attempting to make us corrupt what the Lord sent us here for in the first place. That was him. He was tempted of flesh things in the wilderness. But at that last moment, thoughts entered into the mind of Christ. He spoke those thoughts out. Being in the flesh. Right? Being in this body that's prone to fears, that's prone to pain, that's prone to discomfort, prone to all sorts of things. And Jesus then said, nevertheless, thy will be done. Nevertheless, thy will be done. Because he didn't want that cup at that moment of time. Did you guys read that? Jesus, the perfect one, the one without sin, who was in the flesh, who still had no sin, wanted that cup gone, but he said, nevertheless, thy will be done. Nevertheless, thy will be done. And then he spoke to his disciples and told them, can't you stay awake with me? Because they kept falling asleep. And he said, don't you know Satan desires you? I often wondered about that. Because it wasn't a prayer. Because they were walking through the streets and everything else. Satan couldn't get to them then. Why? Because they were awake. They were awake. And then I wondered, well, surely it can't be natural sleep because all of us have to sleep. No, that wasn't it. Jesus was teaching. He was teaching. Because your moment of weakness is the moment when you're wide awake, but you go asleep spiritually. You hear thoughts in your heads, don't you? Things come against you. How many of you right now, you feel that you don't have clear direction? And maybe you felt that way for a while. And you say, Lord, give me some direction. I don't have direction. How many of you felt that way? That is the first stage, right, of going to sleep. And it's one of the first stages of going to sleep, because if you have no direction, you tend to sit still, right? Because you don't have direction, you get discouraged in going forward. You don't do this purposely. You get discouraged in going forward. We have all done this. Anybody who says they haven't done this, well, they're greater than Jesus. How about that? So we've all done it. Jesus himself said right before he was about to be crucified, oh, take this cup from me. Right? Sometimes you want your purpose clarified. You can still walk with the Lord, still pray, still teach, still do things, but guess what? If you don't have direction, your purpose, your purpose meter is going to be limited. Right? It's going to be limited. And if it's limited like that, misdirection comes. Because he's trying to make you corrupt yourselves. Now, here's the bad part. How does he make you corrupt yourself? Through other folks. You can corrupt yourself through other people. Other folks. You start to corrupt yourselves. And if you do that, if you corrupt yourselves through other folks, you have given in. A person can't make you do anything. It's when we give in, we start being corrupted. Does that make sense? In every case in my life, I don't know about yours, but nobody can make me do anything. I can be tempted into doing things I shouldn't. But nobody can make me do anything. Nobody. In other words, when I give in, that's when I do something I shouldn't. When I'm not giving in, I'm wide awake and I'll stand against it. When we give in, we've truly given in. Can everybody understand that? Can you see the truth behind that? And so Satan is trying to get people to corrupt themselves through many, many means. And folks, listen, one more interruption. I am telling you, this is happening more and more. We're just going to put a barrier up there, a spiritual barrier. I'll be right back. I'm going to put a spiritual barrier up when I get back. All right? When I get back, a spiritual barrier is going up. Watch it cease. It'll cease. It always does. This is not my work. It's our Father's work. And it's not popular to talk about these things. But it stomps right on the enemy's head. It cuts off his avenue. It's like a tactical advantage that he does not want to lose. You begin to expose his little tricks. They can no longer work in your life. When they can't work in your life, he just let his hands off. He can't touch you anymore. He touches you in those areas that either we deny or the areas we don't want to see. So when you shed light, the truth of Christ, by way of Scripture in these areas, he can't get a grip into your life and he can't hold your life there anymore. All right? One more interruption. We have to go into the caution about your fellow man. Not that you should be scared of them, but you need to have understanding of how people are operating. It's going to break people's hearts in a couple weeks. Now, right now, it looks beautiful in Texas, right? As far as the people are concerned and what they're doing. I know certain people didn't make it. I know that. But it's going to really break people's hearts. You're talking about depression. That spirit of depression is probably rubbing its hands, saying, oh, yes, we have placement. No, they have no placement. Because we, being the saints of the Most High, are going to get right in the way of his placement. How about that? It takes you to be in the way to push those spiritual things out that people can't see. But you've got to see them first. And then you can forbid them from entering in because you're going to occupy that area. Every area you occupy. See, it's not like there's no magic word. Listen to me close. If devil is in a region, right? Let's say there's a devil in region A, but you're in region C. You can talk all day about region A, but until you cover that area with the blood of the Lamb, because you're covered too, unless you shine your light in that place, they're going to be there. As soon as you step in there, they're going to fight you, first of all, from coming into that place in the first place. They don't want you there. But once you get there and occupy, they can't come back. It is your occupation of a place that forbids them from entering in. Your occupation. Let me take care of something, folks. I'm going to be right back, okay? That works in your homes, too. When you're charged up in the Spirit in your homes, have you noticed the devil runs out of the windows? He runs out of the doors and everywhere else. He'll put up a fight, but you're not interested in fighting. You're interested in glorifying the Lord. And everybody who is influenced by the enemy, they have two choices: flee or fold. Have you noticed that? Anybody. But when you're defeated and you're in your home, the attacks begin. How many of you know that? Some of you women know that. When you stand defeated, the attacks come. And then you'll end up saying, well, I just need a break. And the Lord said, don't take a break. Because you're operating by his Spirit. Don't take a break. The Spirit that you have is not yours. It's his. Don't take a break. You don't need to take a break. Because every time you take a break, he will kick you. You didn't think it was fair and honorable, did you? He's not honorable nor fair. I'm going to be back. I'm going to take up Connie's suggestion. I'm going to get some water. I have to drink water. That other stuff won't work. I'll be right back, folks. Folks, I was looking into some things of, what's really been happening with all the dynamics, changes, global changes that we're facing. A lot of people are conceding to the fact, I think this storm scared them, but I also think they're going overboard with some of the meteorologists and their perceptions. I really do. Because the dynamics of the globe are not simply tied to the atmosphere, but also to geology. Believe it or not, also to, there's another component that's very difficult to explain because most people don't believe that, and that's something people have to step in to actually believe. But because there's a lot to you, a little more than what you know, but it's not been demonstrated to a degree as though a block is in front of you, and you can't really see the spiritual things. It's very difficult to understand how much of a role that you play in the formation of things around the globe, but I'm going to give you an example of something. Did you notice that the kindness being exposed in Texas, right, caused, or let's just say, to me, I'm going to say it looked like that way to me, when people began to actually feel remorseful of neglecting each other, and they certainly did learn some lessons, but there were some heartfelt words being exchanged in Texas concerning people's lives. I noticed that the storm, the power of the storm and the high pressure system really took shape. That high pressure, by the way, has been sitting there for days, and it didn't do anything. But as soon as people came to the aid of people, and they neglected their own jobs and this, that, and the other, it's almost like this high pressure gained strength and began to push out the storm, right? The dry air began to push out the storm when the people changed. Now, in Scripture, it also says that if the Lord's people, those people who are called by the name of the Lord, humble themselves and pray, right? Seek his face, he turn and heal the land. To a degree, the first step in that, which was providing or giving or extending unconditional love to their neighbors, not based on color, race, or anything else, right? But they just extended a hand, and lots of it was just very precious, and there were casualties. But as a whole, scriptures are being read on public television, CNN, Weather Channel, all over the place. People were really in this different mode, and I believe what has taken place is, for a long time, unlike Katrina, where people were so embedded in politics and what they wanted, I think that over the course of time, a lot of things have failed for humanity. I mean, it's 2017. It is nothing like we thought it would be, right? Many things have gotten in the way. Many things have been stagnant. It's almost like the economy has been unsolvable. Things have been unsolvable for so long, right, that people truly began to turn back to their Creator. We know that statistically because the conversation about Christ has gone up, even on Facebook, like you wouldn't believe. And it's like it's catching hold of folks. The element of people and their ability to forgive, right, and to lay down their guard and to go and truly unconditionally help someone changes things. Because prior to this, hatred was building up. Complacency was building up. People were irritated, aggravated at each other for no reason, just looking for something. They were like fuel cans running around, waiting for someone to ignite them. A hidden type of aggravation, a disgust. Hatred was building up, now I have to say it, throughout the last two presidencies. A lot of hatred had built up. It really had, and it began to culminate in different ways, right? All of a sudden, it's being diffused. Some of the old arguments don't work, right? It's so funny because a lot of people, and I have to say this, a lot of people, well, I'm going to say it. You may not like me for saying it, I'm going to say it anyway. A lot of the things, I'm going to start with President Trump. A lot of the things that people said what absolutely happened the first few days when Trump was elected never happened. A lot of things that people said upon Obama's re-election what happened never took place. So we were operating in a type of delusion ourselves. In all honesty, our imagination ran away with us at what a person could be doing. Well, that's not reality about what a person could be doing. And then people's imagination ran away with what Trump could be doing, right? What happened was the truth. What happened was what we experienced. What we experienced was nothing like what people thought it would be. We were speaking about potentials. Lots of people were speaking about the evil potential of this person, that person, this person. None of it happened. None of it. And what happens is these things are losing grip. Now, you have to be cautioned. The prophecies, don't ever lose your grip of the prophecies. But spend less time in defining the prophecies. Know about the prophecies. Be aware of the prophecies. Right? But there's a work that we're sent here to do. And during this storm, people actually did a part of that work. I heard that term, "Thank you, Jesus of Nazareth," many, many times because of this storm. I heard a person on the Weather Channel say, "Thank you, Jesus of Nazareth," a few times. Right? I'm really not impressed when a person says, thank God for this, that, and the other. I'm not impressed with that because that's not qualified. But when somebody says, thank you, Jesus of Nazareth, that's something different. And that's very different. And when they say that on national television, that's really different. It's very different. And so you saw a lot of this. But you also see the character of humanity going up a couple notches concerning standards. Why? Because this was not political. Because this had nothing to do with the banks. Because this was above mankind. And mankind pulled together saying, no, you're not going to kill my brother or my sister today. They said, no. They were looking at people. I'm going to pull you to safety. If you've ever been in a position like that, I'm telling you, your heart gets intent on somebody else, and you will look at them so intently saying, no, if it costs me my life, you're going to be safe tonight. And that becomes the intent of an individual. That's love. When it begins to ignite, it spreads, kind of like a riot, but a good one, right? Right before the storm hit, the atmosphere in America was different. This gave people hope. It really did. Immigrants who were terrified they were about to be exported, they have hope now that, yes, people do have compassion. There are people who have not come out of their homes in months, scared to walk the streets. And then, of course, these supremacist groups began to march, no matter who sent them up there or what for. It did cause fear. And then this happens. All of a sudden, nobody cares about ideologies. They care about the fellow man. Now, that is the truth of humanity, not this other stuff. Hatred is not the truth of humanity. Stinginess, greediness, all that, that's not the trait of humanity. We made those things up. Isn't it funny that everything we make up, we end up arguing about? Everything God declared, we can't argue about. And so what you saw was a drawing one person to another, determined to do something for somebody else. And it really was like a very good riot, right? Like a mob mentality full of love. A mob of love is what you saw. People risking their own lives. People did risk their lives. Some people died saving other people's lives. Many people are in the hospital right now for exhaustion because they were helping other people. They did so to the point of exhaustion. That is absolutely beautiful. And when it began to continue to take place, what happened? The storm kind of went down, didn't it? The winds kind of died, didn't they? You have water problems, but you're not having 20 inches of rain tonight. A test, it seems like. When it first happened, it was just so coincidental that we would have this racial divide again in America. And a flood came in, a terrible flood that destroyed many things to reestablish love in the hearts of men, almost like a reminder of what we are. We are the human family that God made. We didn't make ourselves. We make our own titles. We make our own positions. But we acted like human beings. And we recognized Jesus of Nazareth. Many did. And they were awestruck by the kindness of people they once hated. You know and I know, I'll go ahead and say it, there were black folk out there that didn't like white folk, and white folk that didn't like black folk, and immigrants that didn't like white folk and black folk, and some of the white and black folks didn't like the immigrants. It took it all away, because when somebody on the opposite side comes to save your life and put themselves at risk, it changes everything. You throw away all these stigmas and stereotypes, don't you? You don't care, right? You don't care anymore. And humanity rose up a notch. They really did. I thought it was beautiful. How many more demonstrations will it take that we maintain it? That's going to be the question. I'll tell you this prophetically. Yes, prophetically. I can do that. I'm a servant to the Most High. I believe in Yeshua HaMashiach. If man turns on each other again, the same place as the storm was, It'll be 7 times worse the next time. And we all know that if we're not careful, if someone does not remind people not of what they lost, but what they gained, if someone does not take this and start printing stories of the kindness and the love and what we have overcome. See, somebody's got to extract what we've overcome in this. I know it's a lot of losses. You don't fixate on the losses. You fixate on the gains. Everybody has had losses. But you've got to find the real gains. I'm not talking about gains like everybody held hands, not that type gain. But the fear element left certain folks who were terrified of other races. Governors started changing their minds, realizing how important humanity was again. It almost instilled a new importance to your fellow man. You also know that some people, while this situation brought people together, often situations tear people apart. Natural disasters bring people together. Man-made disasters tear people apart. Everything man does, and this is what they have to learn, whatever mankind does outside of the Lord has a foul intent. It does nothing but cause division. It does not matter how prosperous it seems, it causes division. Anything rooted outside of God's established way causes division. When America was first founded, they did have the Father in mind. Oh yes, they absolutely did. But then as time went forward, they began to define it by their own definitions. And that's when things fell apart. That's when people became hateful. That's when people divided. Now listen to what I'm saying. When they first came here to America, they went through storms that drew communities together. Do you know there was a time when Native Americans and the settlers were hanging out with each other, exchanging ideas, eating with each other and everything else? And what happened was a time of plenty came. And when times of plenty come, people often want to go back to groups to enjoy it. And they never come back together. And then somebody stirs up strife and lies. And through a time of plenty, people start to enjoy themselves a little too much, and that's where murder comes in. Now that same pattern is also going to take place here in this country and in every country, according to the Most High. They come together on one front. It's humanity. But you know and I know there's always someone who sows bad seeds yet again. Now it's up to those who believe in Yeshua HaMashiach to cover them in prayer. How do you do that? How do you affect a person like that and actually defeat them? It's not by how you talk. But if you allow those things to operate within yourselves, you've opened the door within the respective country you're in for it to operate. If the church closed the door on division and anger could not function within the nation of which they reside, because all nations are spared due to God's children. We've got to get that in our heads. If we lose something, it is loosed. If we allow something to operate, it will operate. If we practice something, it's going to be practiced. If we look over something, it's going to be overlooked and grow. But if we refuse to allow ourselves to operate in certain respects, it is bound up. You can say something is bound all day. It is what you allow to work through you that binds and loosens, not necessarily what you say. Which means our activities, the way we live our lives, all sorts of things must change according to the Word of God. You know why that's important? Because there will come a day, one time, very soon, when your neighbor may be touched by a weapon, but you will not. There's always a time when a terrorist group will spare a few people, and they don't know why. I've seen that with ISIS a few times. They would go and start slaughtering people. they would face certain people, and it's like the person was invisible. They would just walk away. As though something shielded that person or hid that person. They stood there. They were going to die with the rest. But something interceded, like a brick wall, stopped them from getting to that one individual. I've seen the same thing in combat. I know the capabilities of the Lord and what He will do according to His word. You see, if you live by His word, then you're going to live by His word. If you live by His word, you're not going to die by His word. If you live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword. If you live by His word, you're going to have life everlasting. That's not to get happy and say nothing can touch my flesh or anything else, no. But you will not be corrupted. Supernatural things will happen in your life. And you won't even ask for them. All those folks of which supernatural things have happened in their lives, they have committed themselves to going all the way. And the supernatural things happened without them asking, because they weren't looking for it. They were being obedient. I've noticed that in my life too. Those people who are obedient, supernatural things always happen to them. Those who ask for supernatural things, it's almost like they don't get it. They may be spared, nothing supernatural. They may have a rough time, nothing supernatural. But those who commit themselves to the will of God in truth and do so in love, the supernatural works on their behalf. God is with them always, because He said He would be with them. Supernatural is supernatural to just common, everyday folk who don't know about the Father. What men call supernatural should be normal to us, and I'm not talking about ghost stuff either. Moses parting the Red Sea should be adopted in our minds as saying, yes, the Father will deliver us. Simple as that. It's just an amazing thing. Those who are determined to finish the race and go all the way. Supernatural things happen in their life all the time because they're sincere about finishing the race. And to be sincere about finishing the race is to do exactly what they did in Texas. They dropped everything they were doing and went to other folks. And you know, some of those people are going to be severely blessed. Severely. And they were already a blessing to somebody else. And if they maintain it, they'll know the hand of God in their lives in a very gentle and pleasing way. Because they're already willing to give up their lives for the sake of another. The Lord will bestow upon them the most. Because they're already willing. If He has to prove to you He can bestow things upon you, you're not going to get a bunch. You're going to get by, yeah, you will, but if He has to prove it to you, that means you don't believe. These people, some of these people didn't even know God, but they loved their fellow man. Therefore, guess what? They knew love itself, so they knew something of the Father. Spirits like lions, gentle and accepting, and doing things for the love of their neighbor that they did not know. There were a few people out there that advocated, listen to this, advocated to build the wall. They hopped right out there to the immigrants who were speaking broken English, and they did their thing. These are people outside the body of Christ, doing things like they are true members of the house of the living God. Here we are in the body of Christ, and we debate such issues. Most of our debates are about who's right and who's wrong. We should toss all those debates and throw them in the garbage can. And dare not have one of those debates in view of our Father ever again. We're like children arguing in front of the Most High, forgetting He can see us and hear us. We have been protected so long that we have become spoiled. There's a warning about people being spoiled. Israel was spoiled. Israel was spoiled before 70 AD. They were spoiled before that, and they lost everything. And what do? We want to be spoiled. We want to have that time of plenty for ourselves. But the Lord is moving now. People, you see this love in Texas. You see it in other places too, but you see it in Texas. Everybody can see it in Texas. That's why I'm talking about it, because people can refer to it. It's undeniable. You've seen it with your own eyes. Now we know in the prophecies, it does not look like that for certain areas. But the question is why? Why doesn't it look like that in certain areas? There are places in the U.S. of A. that if it were to happen in those places, it would not look like it did in Texas. Texas is very diverse. Certainly in Houston, that's a very diverse city. It's full of everybody. They have their own crime and everything else, right? But it's full of all types of people. In other states, who are highly biased, it wouldn't have turned out that way. We wouldn't have. That goes for all races. For all races, it wouldn't turn out that way. And we're going to continue to see these examples. But the question is this: will they maintain what the Lord has shown them? Will they even perceive the great gift that came from such destruction? Will they receive it? God can easily restore a person. But the question is, will they receive what he's given them, that their souls may prosper? Because the Lord said, whether you prosper as your soul prosper. If your soul is prospering, everything else in your life is going to prosper. Period. And if you look at yourselves and say, well, why am I not prospering? All you have to do is look at the corrections that have been made in your soul. Nothing to get upset about, something to have joy about and say, oh, I see it. Thank you, Lord. You didn't do this and that for me because my soul was not in the right place. I was operating my flesh. Things brought to us, to our attention. We find out we're doing something horribly wrong. We make changes. And you know and I know if God had bestowed upon you something prematurely, it could have destroyed you. No, he wants you to live. Right? We're like premature babies. And God's touching us saying, live, 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 live. In fact, that's his call going out. Live. But there's only one way to live. And it's not the way Satan is showing everybody. See, the way of Satan burned out in Texas. Political jargon didn't work. They tried to have a political dispute over the funding. Nobody wanted to hear it. I thought that was the funniest thing. Nobody wanted to hear the senators. They didn't. When was the last time you saw a senator? To hear what they have to say. Because I'm telling you something, folks, if you like categories, what you have just witnessed is people. Right? People. People being shown on national television, and the ratings shot up every time somebody helped somebody else. Now I know who these folks are. They're going to capitalize off that. Nobody wanted to hear about politics. Nobody. They showed something of North Korea, the ratings went straight down. That tells you something about the populace watching television. Sadly, what people they call them dummies, the lost, right? They're not lost. They just need a right representative. I'm telling you, the harvest is ready. It's ready. They're ready to receive the truth of the living God. Not this spoken stuff that we speak all the time, but the demonstration. Houston was a demonstration. Corpus Christi, a demonstration. Those surrounding parishes and provinces and everything else, that was a demonstration. And when people showed that, more stories, positive stories that they had, the higher the ratings. Because people had one primary question. Are they going to be okay? It's like all of a sudden the entire country cared about one another. When not more than 2 weeks ago, this country was tearing itself apart and had been doing so for many years. No president can bring the country together. No one. It took a storm to bring the country together. And that's something. Everybody failed in bringing the country together like this. Not even the ministers could do it. Well, a storm did. A storm succeeded where everybody in the earth failed. Isn't that something? Naturally, you're going to have some people say, well, Harp sent that storm to throw off on this racial stuff that was happening so we could hide the money over here because the economic collapse was coming and they had to do something because they weren't ready to go underground. You know, the conspiracy theories and all that kind of stuff, they'll be saying those things. I'm not saying they're wrong either. I'm just saying they're going to say it. They're going to make up lots of things. But the point is this, for the Christian, for the believer in Christ, you You saw the potential of humanity. You see it still lives within people to give up everything they have for the sake of somebody else. You saw your brother and your sister unnamed. They're not in the body of Christ. You see what's out there before you. That should be encouraging to you to not give up. Some of those that even that you saw on television in distress, somebody is to find them. And you don't know if that person is you. You're here. And you're to go and get a specific number of folks to share the gospel with, either by word, either by your happenings or deeds or help, whatever. Maybe you give a quarter to somebody somewhere in a grocery store, and you just simply say, "God bless you greatly," or something like that. That's enough. You just share the gospel. And you may say, "Well, how did I share the gospel?" Because not only did you pay attention to them knowing that they needed a quarter, but you conveyed the desire that the Lord bless them and touch them, and then they will receive things from you. That can change a person's life. I know people right now who converted from small acts, not the big ones. They heard every minister out there, but they said it's always this one person that captures somebody's attention, and they perceive the sincerity and the truth in that one moment, and that's all it takes. And then the person who perceived it can never forget about them, and then they say, "Well, it must be real." It's not everywhere, but it must be real. Then they end up repenting because they want that peace that they were able to perceive. It's a stability. It's kind of like when you came upon one of those older preachers who was really a preacher. They weren't famous, but they were really a preacher. And the atmosphere was different around them. It's like they were all business with lots of love, no games, and there was a type of power that you did perceive. When you were very young, you ran away from them. You found out the power was real, and that's why you almost burnt yourself up with that cigarette trying to hide it. Anybody ever do that? I had a relative did that all the time. Oh, they get so mad. As soon as somebody came around the corner, it would be a minister. They'd have to hide it. Right? Drinking, you're stumbling, trying to get rid of it. Holding your breath. Don't let them come up and say hi and you got a mouthful of smoke. That wouldn't look good. But people did those things. Why? Because they felt the authority. You don't do that unless you can perceive the authority. Who allowed you to perceive that authority? It was not the minister. It was the Lord. And sure enough, that same individual demonstrated something small to you. That same one you hid from. You had your eye on him. You knew. See, here's the thing. You knew when he was coming. You knew when he was coming. And that's why you hid. You knew where he was. You could feel it. Oh, he must be around here somewhere. I can almost feel it. You were on guard, on watch. That was the first confirmation you received in your life that the authority is real with the Lord. It was so authoritative that you hid your sin from that individual. Right? There's always that one. Always. But guess what? You're going to be that one for someone. You know that? You are. And so it's important how you live your life. It really is. It's important. I know your life is trying. I know you can't get it right every second of the day. That's what grace and mercy are for. Don't ever let Satan tell you that you've messed up one time too many. That's not true. Where sin does abound, grace does that much more abound. Satan is a liar. Don't let anybody tell you that. When you strive to be a representative of Jesus Christ, you're going to look into the character of Christ. No one who doesn't believe in somebody wants to be like him. You have to believe in somebody to be like him. And then when you want to be like him and the opposition comes and you still follow that individual, you really have to believe in him. That's why a Christian is supposed to have opposition. There's no way you can be a Christian without opposition. No way in the world. You have to be opposed. And that determines your authenticity. Because listen, if you truly believe in a cause, it does not matter the opposition, does it? Doesn't matter. Let me bring up something a lot of Christians don't like. Christmas. When you want your child to know that you love them, and it's often conveyed on Christmas. In your heart, you don't care what gets in the way. You're going to do something, right? Huh? Regardless of what everybody thinks, you're going to do something. You won't let anything get... Why? Because you truly do love your child. And somehow you're going to convey it. And nothing can stop you from doing that. And if it fails, you're going to try again. And if it fails, you're going to try again. You're going to keep trying. Why? Because you believe. You believe in conveying that love. Why do you believe in conveying the love? Because you truly do love them. And you're not going to give up. See, when you truly love someone, nothing can stop you from loving that someone. When you truly believe in Christ, nothing can come against your belief. I know many of you absolutely believe. And you're learning how to live that way. It's challenging, isn't it? Right? And every time you face opposition, you're proving to yourselves and to others who see. Because listen, here's something wonderful. You see opposition as someone getting in your way. I don't see it that way. I used to. I don't see it that way anymore. The very one that opposes you is the very one that needs to see that your love for Christ is real. They have become you in your moment. When you stood against things and somebody loved you through it. Somebody did it. Your whole family could have rejected you. Somebody loved you. Somebody showed you love at the right time in your life. And nothing got in the way of that. And it was opposed. See, when love is opposed, and you see love in the end anyway, then you know it's true love. If love is opposed and it goes away, you'll say, well, they probably really didn't love me. But when it's opposed, and you see love in the end anyway, then that's how you know it's real. When you're following Christ and somebody else sees you following Christ without any opposition, it will not validate your walk. But when they hear you say, I love my Lord, and they see you fall flat on your face and you get up because you love the Lord again, and you keep getting up, and they're watching you fall, they're watching you stumble, they're watching you sin and go back to the Lord, you know what you're doing for that person? You're not showing them how much of an idiot you are. You're conveying to them that your persistence and your belief in the Lord is real. And eventually that person's going to look at you and say, wait a minute, this person went through everything. They failed so many times and they never stopped. And that's going to cause someone's belief to skyrocket. Because then they're going to feel, hey, I failed many times. And that's going to let them know, I don't have to stop pursuing what I absolutely believe. And if he loves the Lord that way, they're going to start perceiving the love of God from your life. But they have to see you in a certain way first. They have to see that persistence. Because God will allow them to perceive the truth of that situation. Oh, and by the way, you're ministering to that person. You're demonstrating to them that with the Lord you can always get up. That with the Lord there's nothing that can stop you. That with the Lord he will always bring you through. You're becoming a testimony to both the Old and the New Testament when you are yourselves and when your walk is real and not for show. You see, it's not the ones that hear you so much that are receiving of your life ministry. It's the ones who doubt you, the ones who stand against you, the ones who hear everything you say, all the dumb things you say, any falsehoods that you say, anything they perceive. They have the most ammunition on you in your life. And the entire time, if you stay the course, you're ministering to them. Because you're telling them, no matter what, the Lord will pick you up. If you believe. That's what you're showing. No matter who you are, what color you are, what your background is, the Lord will pick you up if you believe. If you take one step, you'll do a whole lot. And people need to see that. Just like in Texas, they needed to see that, yes, people would drop their jobs to to come help somebody they didn't know. People had to see this. And it gave them hope. It certainly gave you all hope that all people are not monsters out there. Some of you came out of your own hedge and say, wait a minute, people aren't as evil as I thought. You know the guys, some of the guys that look like skinheads, right? And they have the mohawk and the tattoos and things. They showed a picture of two of those guys pulling this black lady out, this big black lady, onto a boat. I thought that was precious. That almost made me choke up and cry. It really did. That a person whose ideology and their idea of everything can absolutely be squashed when another human being is about to perish. You'd be surprised what truth comes out. So what I'm telling you is this: a lot of what people speak in the public is not the truth of that person. How many things have you spoken that wasn't the truth of you? And don't sit there and tell me everything you spoke is the truth of you, because that would be a lie. Don't say that. But how many times have you spoken things that simply was not you? You were doing that in view of other folks. Maybe you joined into a group. Maybe you were with your friends. Maybe you were popular. Maybe you were unpopular. And you began to do the things that they did. But by yourselves, you're not like that. And it took this storm to bring it out. And it takes a disaster to save a soul. Do you understand that? Half of us would not have been saved if our lives hadn't been a disaster. Think about it. Please think about it. Let's face that truth so we can go forward with some more truth. A lot of people pride themselves, well, I was standing with the Lord forever. No, you were not. No, you weren't. Don't play that goody two-shoes picture with anybody, because that's not the truth. I was just as bad as you, and you were just as bad as me. How about that? We're all on the same boat, no matter what your background is. There are no Mr. and Mrs. Goody Two-Shoes here. If you were perfect, you would be invisible, because you would be one of God's angels, or you would have finished your race thousands of years ago, or something like that. But you're here alive, so you're not Mr. and Mrs. Goody Two-Shoes. You're one of the children purposed to be in this time for the sake of somebody else, and everything you do is ministering to somebody else. When you're at work, what you do is ministering to somebody else. How you handle a problem. Even when you do something dumb, if you love the Lord, here's the key: if you truly do love the Lord, you're going to always go back to Him no matter what you have done. See, and that's why people say, well, this person always messes up. They can't love the Lord. And I tell people to hush your mouth. You don't know that person's heart. You better be quiet before the Lord corrects you. I don't like folks who sit there and judge the heart of another person, and God never allowed them to see the heart of another person. That's why we can't read thoughts, so you can work your life out. Because we begin in falsehoods, and we are delivered over the course of time. I don't like the phony baloney stuff. The goody two-shoes. Give me somebody rough, who can't pay attention, who won't pay attention, who's stubborn in the ways and everything else. You show me the worst person you know in the body of Christ. I'll show you someone of whom the hands of the living God are on. I'll also show you someone that when they break free, they'll have 1,000 times more faith than you do, because they messed up everything. And when God delivers them, they're going to give nobody credit. They're going to say, oh no, the Most High did this, not you. Some of you are like that. People's prayers have failed for you in your life. Everything has failed for you. You know why? Because the Lord's going to show you. He's going to show you that He is the deliverer, not man. See, we forget. We live in the time of lying signs and wonders. Now, why would the Lord want all of His children going out there doing signs and wonders? No, if we are in the time of lying signs and wonders, He's having us do something else according to His word that most people don't want to read, because they want to be seen as being holy. People do. They want to be seen as being in a white robe. Come to me for the right answer. No, don't you come to me for the right answer. People need to know that, hey, you're just like they are. The only difference is you believe in the Most High. You believe in Yeshua HaMashiach. And it is by his strength, his love, his power, his drawing spirit that you will be redeemed. And people ought to tell them the truth. And say, wait a minute, according to Scripture, my redemption is not fully complete because I must endure until the end. He that endures until the end, the same shall be saved. You ought to tell them the truth. Somebody say, well, you're redeemed totally and absolutely. You ought to tell them the truth. No, because Jesus said, when you see Jerusalem encompassed about with her enemies, you know that the desolation thereof is nigh, and then at the end he said, look up, for your redemption draweth nigh, when all that trouble comes. That means the end is coming. See, you're fully redeemed when the end comes, which means you can still mess up. People ought to tell the truth and say, no, brother, I'm going to walk just like you are. You ought to tell them my race will be up. This walk for me will be finished when I'm no longer in the flesh. What does that mean? That means when I'm dead or Jesus comes, one or the other. Tell them the truth. That's why people get discouraged. Oh, I thought Jesus was going to take me. What do you mean? How many people want Jesus to come and take them? How many of you, and I'm going to ask you a question, I'm going to set you up for failure. How many people, right, would just love to be with Jesus right now? How many? How many? Type of one. Type of one. If you're honest, everybody would type of one. You're just scared to because I'm setting you up for failure. You're scared too because I'm setting you up for big time failure. There you go, 12 pound. Go ahead, type the one. See, everybody, I would too, right? I would too. Here's how I set you up for failure. Now we have this thought in our heads: I can't wait to be with the Lord. But Jesus said this: if you keep my commandments, the Father and I will make our abode with you, and we will sup with you. So listen, if you're keeping his commandments, you're not going to feel that distance with the Lord. So if you feel distance from the Lord, you have something undone in your life. No wonder you're still alive. Something is undone. So don't ever think you're an expert in everything, and somehow you can advise everybody on everything. Even those who preach the Word of God, something in their life is unfinished. There's some more tests. If the Lord is within you, how can you desire to be with him somewhere else when he's already with you? That means you can't perceive him making his abode with you. See, that's how I set you up for failure. That's called a disconnect. Right? Haven't you guys noticed I fight the issue of people who feel alone? Do you know why? There was a time I was alone for a long time. Until the Lord showed me I was not. Man, listen, when he showed me I was not, I'm telling you, I needed a new change of clothing. That's a fact. Don't sit there and say, well, Lord, just show me like you showed Elijah's protege. You keep asking those things. You don't know what to expect. You're asking for things you really don't want an answer to because you're thinking it's going to look like some Hollywood movie. The power of the presence of a manifestation of the shortest person in the kingdom of God will sing you straight to your knees. Understand that. Sometimes we ask for things we have no idea about, but I found out there's no way in the world I'm alone. I've repented for ever saying that. I've repented for feeling that way. I didn't justify it because there was one time in my life I said, well, Lord, everybody has somebody but me. I feel alone. You guys have been there, right? When you're young, I was real young when I said that. I broke down and said that. Oh, it left so quick. And I got cleaned up, and that was the end of that. Ever since that time, somebody may come to me, well, don't you get lonely? No, I do not. I don't get lonely, no. I don't get lonely. Right? You'd be scared to death if you could actually see what was around you. It's not some pretty picture off Hollywood, I'm telling you. It's a difference between raw power and pretty, right? A lightning bolt. You think that's pretty? You wouldn't if it was on your head. You wouldn't. You think the sun is gorgeous and beautiful? Not if you felt the burning power of the sun on your skin and through your body. It changes everything. So I said, okay, Lord, I got you on that one. Okay. But no kidding, after that, There were some other things that were manifest in my life. They didn't even scare me. They can't hold, listen, Satan's full manifestation of a horde of demons can't hold a candlestick to the awe and the humility one would feel in the presence of maybe 2 or 3 of the holy angels. How about that? The whole hell itself is nothing compared to that type of presence. It will pierce through you. You'll be an instant liar, an instant sinner, an instant murderer, instant thief. You will see yourself as unclean. The truth is exposed in you. You will fall to your knees and almost die because you can't stand the conviction, and you won't cry out for mercy. You'll say, no, I deserve all death, because then the truth is exposed in a manifestation like that. And you really do see who you are, and you'll say, oh my Lord, I'm so unclean. There's no way I can judge anything. I can't even judge Satan. And when you're in the presence of the Most High, no one will be able to utter a lying word before him. People will hold their heads down in shame, knowing that they deserve to go straight to hell, and that's where they will go. They will understand in fullness all things at one moment. We imagine down here because things are unseen. But he's given us enough to operate in truth. The question is, will we? Because you're an example to somebody, and you're making a difference in somebody's life. Even with your failures. Sin and faults are 2 different things. You're making a huge difference. I'll be back in a moment. I must talk about the Earth's magnetic field. I'll be right back. We're back. Attitudes of people changing. Is it going to be a shocker? It's a type of despotism that's forming in people. They will become vile, anxious. They will. Where will this stem from? A culmination of things. For you who belong to the Lord, for those of you who truly believe, you'll have an understanding of situations spiritually. But all those who are not now given an understanding spiritually does not necessarily mean somebody is joined the church right now at this moment either. A lot of people, you don't know who they are, but they will be in the fold. Some people have no spiritual understanding because when they knew, just like the scriptures we read last night, when they foreknew that God had given them foreknowledge about some things that they do know. The problem is they ignored it. When they ignored it like that, bitterness settles in, all sorts of things settle in. Now they have a choice to make, right? Either to fully surrender and go with the Lord, or stay in their bitterness and be eaten up from the inside out. But then you have another set of people who are given totally over to their own flesh. And when their way is challenged, right, they're not going to bode very well with everybody else. In other words, imagine a system that has no choice but to change. But you help build the system. Now, if you're a Christian, you understand that all things of this earth, being man-made, are going to fail anyway. But while they are man-made, no one is to worship them. But some will deify the system as higher than the Most High. These folks who have given themselves over to that are going to find themselves with no place. When you find yourself with no place, and your body begins to metabolize things differently, and your hormones, because of biological systems in your body responding to the environment, are different, there's going to be a type of insanity. A real insanity. You mingle that with a lot of scientists now. I mean, they are spending billions of dollars because they must figure out some things about gravitational waves to sustain quite a few other things. They're going to lock themselves in certain areas which have their own magnetic field. and gravitational constants, so their bodies biologically can stabilize. And what I'm telling you is that most of the sciences in the earth right now are to do one of two things. Number one, to protect the folks that are valued among men. And number two, to hunt or search for a brand new place. That seems far-fetched, right? But here we have CERN right in the earth. Right? CERN. LHC. They're constantly adding new technology. And what they're about to do now is play with something different than antiprotons, a very specific type. And they have some very expensive equipment that they're installing. Even right now, they're almost near completion. They should be installing them. Next year, they're going to do their last run. In January of 2019, they shut down. Do you know that? Whatever they have to finish, they have to finish very quickly, because they're moving to the next phase, and so they are working double time, crunching numbers and everything else. But what have they done other than experimenting things that people largely don't understand? I'll tell you what they've done. They've mastered the harmonics of the magnetic field of Earth. They have matched it. So much so, now they're filtering out all the inbound noise that comes in, because they have perfected the harmonics of the magnetic field of the Earth. They're also playing with gravitons, and they're also perfecting, in a big degree, what's called gravitational, let's just say gravitational waves. That puts it in a context you can understand. Gravitational waves. The force responsible, right, for pulling things down to a certain area, right? So you really have three elements of control here. There's gravity, which is far different than what most people think, and there's really there's not enough money for the average person to go and investigate gravity waves and things of that nature. Number two, you have electromagnetism, and then you have, well, let's just say electricity, and then you have magnetism. Okay? So CERN includes all three. Gravity, right? Electricity with electrons and protons and neutrons, and magnetism. They have perfected magnetism, or you cannot direct high-speed particles. You can't direct high-speed particles without precise magnetic control. The missing element is gravity itself. So they have built lots of devices, right? Emma says gravity waves have never been proven. Wrong. It's actually some published papers. Listen, if you go, see, this is what I'm telling you guys. There's so many things out there in your face that most people don't know about, right? They're already working with gravity waves. They've been doing this for the last 7 years. But most people will say that's not proven. That's not true. For the last 7 years, they have perfected the electronics, the sensory material, the gate passage, and everything else. And it's right down there at CERN. Right now, it's being installed at CERN. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, you can look into CERN, and you're going to find out why they're utilizing gravity waves, why they have to filter gravity waves. Now, you don't filter a gravity wave if it does not exist. You certainly don't spend billions of dollars in research with facilities all over the earth concerning gravity waves if they don't exist. And so they tell the same story. Just like the antiproton. There's no such thing as an antiproton. Wrong. They knew about that in the 60s. They knew about antimatter a long time ago. But when you're dealing with cutting-edge science, right? These are, let's just call them, these are higher-level sciences. And the only way you're going to find out about higher-level sciences is to either be extremely nosy or to have been introduced to them so you know where to look and know what names to spot or you become one of the scientists who have been at the platform of discovery and implementation and innovation. Other than that, a student is not going to learn everything because they remember something. A student must learn the basics and then go up. And it's always political because of the schools, right? But when it comes to higher end sciences, people don't know anything about those things. Science advances at least 50 years every single day. Because of electronics, there are large-scale formulas, algorithms being run 50 years every single day. So every day, we're 50 years behind because something else has been extracted, right? To be proven to the scientific community means it has to be replicatable. But listen to this. The stealth bomber was impossible, right? Until it was introduced to the public. And people heard large booms and noises and black shadows, and it was the SR-71 Blackbird, of which the expert says it's impossible for anything to reach that speed. Correct? Didn't they say this? It's impossible. And there's no way something could not be detected on radar. Something can't have a cross-section that tiny, or a signature that tiny. It's always impossible until the military-industrial complex introduces something they've been working on for the last 15 years, and the public only finds out about it 40, 50 years later. What is one of the most reliable helicopters in the armed services? Anybody know? Anybody know? What's one of the most deadly helicopters in the armed services? Anybody know? One of the most deadly. Anybody? Wouldn't that be the Apache? People know them as the Apache, right? And the Black Hawk, right? Very, very diverse chopper, right? There you go, Black Hawk. So you have that A-16, you have these choppers. How old do you think they are? How old? Anybody? How old do you think they are? What if you were to find out that the Black Hawk was being designed a little bit after the Vietnam War? What would you say to that? I bet you some people say, no. There's no way. Since the Vietnam War, there's no way. What if I were to tell you that most of the equipment that you see, that you are aware of, that the U.S. Army uses, the actual platform was built a long, long time ago? You would say, no. No way. And how can an airframe like that be designed without the aid of the computers we use today, but be so structurally sound that they wouldn't change the design, only a few modifications, avionics packages, and things of that nature, right? Listen, the Apache and the Black Hawk and some of the other choppers that are out there is old technology. What flies with an Apache? Observation helicopters, right? OH-58s. Old technology. Old. Why? Why is it so surprising? Because they didn't tell you about it. And that's our downfall in the public. In the public's eye, people will often say, well, if I don't know about it, it doesn't exist, therefore it's not part of my world, therefore I give it no thought. That's why you don't know anything. And that's why the civilian populace is always shocked and surprised when something happens. Because they have to prove it to add it into their way of operation and world. That's not a bad thing. But it is, because the scale of things that have advanced far beyond what you know is incredible. And they're working on a totally different level. And so when you're listening to folks who have covered CERN in the past, I hope you didn't count them off. They were just a little before their time. That's all. Some folks have given interviews on CERN, right? What they said a little before the time where people had the understanding. They couldn't encompass the information that was being put out there. They didn't know how it was going to impact their lives. How is it going to impact your lives? By behavior. Because any change in the magnetosphere is going to change your behavior. Your brain cannot work effectively and efficiently outside of the Earth's magnetic field. And the harmonics have to be correct. And the only way to keep the harmonics is through a supercomputer tuning it just right, and you have to play with gravitational forces. But of course, that couldn't be proven because there are no such thing as gravitational waves until you go to certain articles which talk about gravitational waves. How about that? They're out there. They've been out there for a long time. They really have. Long time they've been out there. So now, somebody says is a revamped all its newest tech with refurbished. There you go. Okay, that's it. That's it. That's it. Most of the good stuff was built a long time ago, before they had the computers that we have today. Most of the good stuff. We don't really design anything new. We perfect what we already designed. You're starting to see it now that all we do is take something that does exist and improve upon it. We don't really invent anything new. Those folks at Lockheed will tell you that. Skunk Works, they'll tell you that. Some of the old folks out there, they'll tell you that about their equipment. You think that technology is 100 years? You have to look at the scale of things. There's some things you couldn't possibly imagine. Particle weapons, the LHC, right? CERN, that facility at CERN shocked people when it gained notoriety. Facilities like CERN have been around for years. Years. A long time. Particle beam weapons, particle colliders, antimatter, all these things were back in the 70s, 60s, and 70s. Do you know that? Then you go back to the 50s, and some material was actually extracted. They just take those things out of the public's eye. See, when something is in the public's eye, the public can become concerned over things they shouldn't be concerned about. You have to have oversight. So how do you get rid of oversight? You don't tell the people. You classify it as a black project. You can move thousands of years, right? And I say that because bureaucracy and morality will slow a project down. And if it threatens a town or something like that, you can forget it, right? But what you don't know about, you're not going to challenge. And they give you any cover story they want. But the harmonics of the earth can now be altered. Hope you understand that. Certainly not on the entire global scale. On a small scale, yes. It can be altered. Harmonics with charged particles in a very time sequence that matches a frequency. And when you're dealing with magnetism, you replicate what's happening naturally in the earth. But the only difference is you can control it. So, I need to tell you something else. Why would a neutrino detector be needed at CERN? See, the only reason why they would tell the public about certain things they bring in there, some of them have to be cover stories. That's ridiculous, right? Why would you need a neutrino detector? You know what neutrinos are? You count neutrinos right before some supernova. But if the neutrino count goes up, right, a cosmic wave is coming in that could be very dangerous. But they're concentrating on antiprotons. They have a controllable hydrogen particle that they can now manipulate. They can now manipulate gravity waves. They can now manipulate proton activity. And they've been studying, right, high-speed collisions. But why have they been studying high-speed collisions? I'll tell you why. See, there was a guy who came on before who tried to tell people about a supernova. Let me tell you how they fit together. In a supernova, something already exploded. And so when you begin to observe the small particles that are in a supernova, right, they're already coming and going. You can't get them all. So what do? You recreate that stuff yourself. Why would you do that? Because that release of energy is something you can believe. A massive release of energy does something you can't believe. It warps things. But in that warping is what they're trying to get to. Supernovas exposed something. And when it was exposed, they couldn't let it loose. And these guys went straight over into witchcraft after that. It's a type of witchcraft. They're studying what can't be seen, the unknown. anti-particles are what they're studying. Right? Dark particles, hidden particles. Anything hidden is in a different realm, you might as well say, is what they're doing. But you only get that yield through high-speed collisions. And you can't do it with every type of collision. Because they're extracting something. And when they get enough of what they're hunting for, and when they get it down to a science, it can be utilized for things you can imagine. A simple example is this. Why would a person waste their time on having, thousands of pounds of thrust? And the power of gravity is so much more. Why would you fight against gravity that already exists? Why not utilize gravity? And since you're thinking that way, why would you extract electrons only to force them through computer systems when you can utilize the elements in the nucleus with 1,000 times more power? Consequently, the first thing you would have to invent are some real crafty magnets, not just any ordinary magnets, to contain the beams, to contain a nuclear explosion. In a perfect way that you may analyze the particles and diffuse them as they go out, right? You have to have some pretty good equipment to in fact cause a nuclear explosion and contain it. Separated by elements through very large magnets, not allowing chain reactions, but causing a dispersal. These guys are playing with elements that are super powerful. CERN is worse than a nuclear weapon. The magnetic forces produced by CERN alter things. It's offset by things inside the Earth. But I tell you again, why are they studying cosmic rays? Because that's what they are. Because cosmic rays give you an insight to what's coming behind them. And if you know what's coming behind them, if you know the makeup of cosmic rays, you can mitigate it. Now, why would somebody want them? It's in the Bible. Where are they going to hide themselves? That's all you have to know. Where are they going to hide themselves? If you build an underground shelter, it's not protected from cosmic rays. It's not. Neutrinos reach deep in the earth. So do other cosmic particles reach deep in the earth. You have to have an enormous magnetic field to strip away the charge from those high-speed cosmic rays coming in. The earth does it naturally. So then why would you have to have one in an underground base or an underground facility? Only if you knew something was going to happen to the magnetic field of the earth. And when you know it, over the course of history, something has happened to the magnetic field of the earth. And when you know it, it's been documented by mankind every time it happened. And when you know it, it caused people to go mad to slay one another. And when you know it, prophecy tells us that people will do just this. They're going to turn to their brother or their sister and slay them, not knowing who they are. They're going to walk like blind men, which means they won't know anything. What can cause that? Same thing that messed up the cosmonauts. You take somebody and put them in a weakened part of the Earth's magnetic field, and you don't replicate the shielding, which is what all these space vehicles have to have. You have to replicate the magnetic field, or neurological connections in the brain start to break. Well, if they start to break, they're going to start near the front, the outer regions, which leaves an animal on the inside. And people will be mindless zombies. Not walking around like the movies, but more like animals without conscience. Without remorse. No idea what they're doing. Justifying everything and doing everything but walking blindly, killing and slaying everybody to the left and to the right. And the Bible foretells that. I read in the Bible where it says blood will go up to a horse's screw. Now, you read that and you say, well, there's no way people would just slay each other. That's too much hatred. You wouldn't do that in combat, right? You can't, not to the point that there comes a point where you look and you realize that's humanity, certainly when it got down to a few, but the Lord said not so. Because of the blindness because of the madness. He also said he would strike the horses with a blindness and its riders with madness. We keep hearing this word madness, and then you look back at the biological implications of the loss of the magnetic shield, and when you get a total breakdown of the human brain back into animalistic behaviors. But here's what you don't know. So we're going to track it. The changes in the magnetic field in regards to the surface of the earth, or where we actually feel it. When cosmic rays go through things and there's no shielding against it, those charged particles can go right into your cells and begin to damage them, right? They damage your cells. They'll start knocking electrons off of things, right? And what happens is, once the magnetic shielding is totally gone, poofed out from a certain spot, because there is no shielding of the higher speed particles, your neurological connections, which are largely electrical by nature, will no longer fire. And then the ones that do fire will do so incorrectly. And you're going to go into a type of madness. Every emotion, feeling it all at one time. Imagine that. Imagine that. Somebody says, will a magnetic helmet work? No, it will not. It won't. It won't. It's just not going to work. And then you look in the Bible at all these warnings. Die to your flesh daily. Don't operate by the flesh, right? Kill your flesh, destroy your flesh. Don't operate by, the animalistic nature of the flesh and this, that, and the other. Concentrate on those spiritual things. Walk by faith and not by sight. Don't walk by what you see. Walk by what is revealed spiritually. All these different things. Whether you prosper as your soul prosper, right? Feed your spirit, man. All these things you read. Because if a person does not have a soul to govern or to overpower the activities of the flesh, they have no hope. They have no hope. And let me give you an example of something you need to know about. Your own emotions. How many times have your own emotions altered the truth that you really saw? How many times have you been angry at someone simply because of what they did, but when you look back on it, you say, why did I get angry in the first place? How could something so minute have such power over us? If you walk by sight, you're going to be moved emotionally. And most of what you do is going to be emotionally driven. If you walk by faith, you're walking soberly, not moved by emotions, but functioning and operating in the truth revealed by the Spirit, not by the flesh. And if you begin to walk by the Spirit, not being moved by the flesh, it doesn't matter what happens to your flesh, because it lost its control over you a long time ago, and you will grow in the Spirit. That's why Jesus was telling this over and over again. That's why you read about people suffering, and they were not moved. That's why people got themselves in bad positions, and they were not moved. They waited upon the Lord. You can't wait upon the Lord if you're driven by your flesh and emotions. Do you not know your emotions can debilitate you? I told you guys one time, early in a military career, I couldn't push the handle on a 50 caliber weapon, Mondoose, truck mounted. Pushed the trigger, I couldn't do it. I froze up. It's like, what is this? I wanted to, but nothing in me could push it. I couldn't, and you push it, you don't pull a trigger, you push, right? I couldn't push my thumbs. Your thumbs, surely you can push my body froze. Because I heard it. What happened was, I pushed it one time, right, and it was so loud. It scared me, and I couldn't push it again. That's a fact. Prior to the service, I'd never shot a weapon before. Never had an interest in a weapon. But I was interested in serving my country. So in basic training, when you go back in those days, you go the long way like I did. In that basic training, you had to fire off different types of weapons. And when it came to the 50 cal, I froze up like a little baby. I said, what in the world? I was too scared to tell somebody I was too scared. I saw people do that with grenades. You toss a fragmentation grenade, that thing is so loud, you realize that that thing can harm you. And then when you're holding it the next time, and you're told to pull the pin, let go of the spoon, you can't do either. That's when somebody steps in, throws it for you, and then tosses you on the ground. They have to throw you on the ground. You'll kill yourself behind the barrier. Your emotions can debilitate you. Now, why would a person do that? Because of their perception, and fear settles in, and a host of different emotions settle in. And it can debilitate you. Your flesh, through your emotions, can stop you in your tracks. But if you operate in soberness by the Spirit, having understanding, it's very different. Believe me, it's very different. One, you're not trying to salvage your own life. You've already given up your life for the cause of the kingdom of God. That's something most people have not done. And when you don't do that, you're driven by emotions and by saving your life. And that's why fear can take hold, because your life is in danger. But if you've given up your life, you realize, and if you know you've done that spiritually, your life is no longer in your own hands. You put that in the hands of the Father. What will be, and that's how you live. So you're more interested in what you can do for somebody else by the leading of the Lord, not by your own devices or your own design. And once you've overcome your flesh in that way, most of your trials and tribulations will no longer exist. Because if you think about it, your trials and tribulations, what do? Do they not test what you confess? We confess we've given our lives to the Lord. So every time we have a trial or tribulation, we're trying to salvage our own lives, aren't we? These things make sense. Absolute sense. So something is coming. Things are forming. It's a beautiful thing that's happening in Texas right now, but a challenge is coming. Because the earth is going to undergo some massive changes. I'm not talking about weather. Something that would affect people to the degree, instead of saving someone they see drowning, they might join in and help drown them even more through paranoia. People will be paranoid. They will turn against their brother. Brother will slay brother. Fathers will slay sons, and sons fathers. I'm not talking about the scripture where it says they will turn them in to be put to death. I'm talking about something totally different. Something not often read. The chaos that will be in the end times of how paranoid people will be right before absolute truth is established in the world. And who's preparing for this? Those people who work in projects like CERN. And they're shutting down January 2019. They're going to be done with the phases they've gone through. Right? Kathy, no. A person with a brain injury, they're already dealing with it. They've already dealt with it. If you have a brain injury, a lot of people who have TBIs, traumatic brain injury, they've already been through the emotional fits and everything else. They really have. And a lot of them, without medication, have learned to overcome them. At first, they would think it's PTSD or something like that. A lot of people with PTSD have found solutions, emotional solutions. And they've done something else. See, your brain has this ability to follow your soul. Right? Your body can absolutely, it will absolutely follow the command of your soul. That's why placebos work. If a person believes they're going to be healed, their body can begin to heal itself with sugar pills. They have people right now on chemotherapy, but it's not chemotherapy, sugar pills, and they lose all the hair on their body from sugar pills. So they have all the physical manifestations of what they believe is going to work for them. Your body's absolutely under the control of your soul, but the problem is when we allow our bodies to control us. Right? Somebody may say, well, my body doesn't control me. Yes, it does. If you didn't have a shirt on and you walk outside your front door and it's minus 20 degrees, you're going right back inside, won't you? Your body just controls you. Right? You'll back off. You may start shivering to pieces. Right? You can want to go outside all you want, but you're not. Right? When you stub your toe on a table, your body just gave you an alarm. Something down here is wrong, and you reach out and grab that toe. Boy, don't you hate when that happens. But your body can make you respond. But once you have done that enough and felt enough pain and things of that nature, you respond differently to every single happening in your life. You can deal with it. You can't deal with something new, but you can deal with those things you've trained in. We should have found that out by now, because all your trials and tribulations, instead of rebuking them, you should have walked through them. Because you've been exposed to everything that could ever befall the earth. You've been through spiritual assaults. You've been through backstabbings, breaks up and abuses. You've been through everything. The problem is, we push them away. We didn't say to ourselves, okay, this could potentially happen. Let me go over it and get over and go forward. We started running away from them. When you stub your toe on your coffee table, you don't throw out the coffee table. You watch where you're going, correct? But in our trials and tribulations, we try to throw out the coffee table. If that caused the injury, throw it out. That's how we think in our trials and tribulations. But when it's your property, you say, no, I just have to go around it. It can get you sometimes if you're not looking. See, we treat life differently in so many different respects, but we fail to look at the simplistic nature of all things. Somebody caught that and said, well, that is true, isn't it? It really is true. So a lot of people are going to be surprised. You know why? They ran away from every lesson the Lord was giving them. They rejected every single one. Therefore, they don't know. And because they don't know, it's going to cause them a massive limitation. Right? Those of us who had no choice but to go through it because it came back, and it came back again, until we decided, well, it'll come back. I can't afford for that to change me. And then all of a sudden it comes back and it means nothing. Those of us like that, we're going to walk through some things. Why? Because that same trial and that same tribulation does not bother us. Haven't you ever noticed that trials and tribulations, it's not that they go away, it's that you become immune to them. You no longer react to them like you did. They don't really go away, you just become immune to them. But if you're running away from them, you'll often find yourself running into another one, and to another one, and to another. You're going to run your entire life. The day you stop running is the day you start facing these things, is the day you begin to learn. Because everybody who gets through a trial and tribulation, they go down through the course of years, they look back and you say, you know what? I understand now. I didn't understand back then. I understand now. And then you may smile. And that horror you had back in your life, you just found out saved your life that day, but it's 40 years later. You start having understanding of what the Lord was doing in your life, and you start to smile because you feel loved, but only after a long time down the road. And that's something. When we don't understand what's happening, we don't feel loved. 40, 50 years down the road, when we begin to understand what the Lord was doing, we start smiling because we feel the embrace. Oh, he did love me back then. Look at that. Most children don't like their first day of school. Second day, third day, they get in certain things in school. Sometimes kids don't like school. And then the day they graduate, they kind of look back and say it was worth it. I got the diploma. But you have to gain something to appreciate what you went through. It's going to be a shame for those who rejected Christ, who have gone through things just like you have, but rejected Christ. So what they went through is going to be like a chain with a weight they can't escape. It's going to tug them and pull them down straight to the bottom. But for you who have Christ, who will be fully delivered of your flesh. See, when we no longer operate by the influences of the flesh, all things will make sense to us. The majority of our fight has been our flesh. Learning to walk in this world absent the influences of the flesh. So you've been in constant combat and war and everything else. And every time you think you have got to a certain level, here comes a trial or tribulation to either solidify or to reveal to you the truth. And we learn the truth all the time. You know what the truth is? I'm not there yet. That's what we learn. I'm not there yet. Because the day you are there is the day you have an appreciation for what you went through. why we should never run away from such things and get bitter with other folks, right? Because why would my trial or tribulation cause me to be bitter with you who have nothing to do with it? What does that show? That shows I disapprove of the trial and tribulation. I also disapprove of the method in which God is doing things in my life. And so I start blaming everything on the devil who's been dethroned. He's a fleeing serpent. He's a fugitive. Satan is a vagabond. He's angry and cannot touch. How about that? When the Lord said, touch not my anointed, he was speaking to Satan specifically. Do my prophets no harm. Now, if God spoke that, he can't do anything to it, right? But who's been killing the prophets? The Lord said, my people killed the prophets. Who harmed the apostles? The Lord said, my people have been killing everybody I sent to them. It wasn't Satan, it was people. And yes, God set them up to be killed in that way. That doesn't mean you're going to be a martyr. All martyrs knew they were going to be a martyr. They were also born to be a martyr, and they were prepared to be a martyr. Everybody's not going to be a martyr. But keep in mind, it's not known yet what you shall be. But you know you shall be like him. So the fullness of even your life here on this earth is not, you don't know in full. Don't assume that you know everything in its fullness. Just follow the Lord. But please die to your flesh every single day. I regret, folks, I didn't have enough time because of these interruptions. That's okay. We're going to make it up. Tomorrow's Thursday. Nobody's doing anything tomorrow. So why not pop on there in the afternoon or something like that? All right. I know that Pastor Paul will probably be on in the afternoon, but the mornings are free unless Tatum or Angela gets on. I'm not sure yet. They'll let us know. Sometimes they will come on there with the Ring of Fire Begotten Son Ministries. So we'll find out. So much. Lord wills, we'll cover. Not done with CERN yet, though. Higher topics with CERN. Go do some homework, research. Go look in it for yourselves. Right? Go see it for yourselves. These guys are up to something. And even if a person knew, they couldn't tell the average person. They couldn't tell you. They couldn't tell you because there's no real foundation for understanding what somebody would talk about. I've heard people out there tell an absolute truth. I've heard portions of a truth that I know about coming out of people's mouths, but the people couldn't understand them. It sounded too fanciful, right? It's kind of like if we were in the horse and buggy days for somebody to say, well, I'm going to be in Europe in about, 18 hours. Well, that's crazy talk, right? But not in the time where jets were invented. Correct? It'd be absolute, they'd lock you up if you said, well, I think those folks out there, I think I'd like to be one of those who just hang out in the atmosphere. They would lock you up if you said that a long time ago. Right? Do you know something else? The Bishop Wright, he was the one that made the famous statement that if man was meant to fly, right, God would have given him wings or something like that. He'd be like the angels. And then what happened to him? His sons, Orville, Wilbur, they built that plane and made that first flight not too long. Right? Because in his time, those things didn't exist. So he called that crazy talk. And his sons proved him wrong. And we get like that. So we have to have a context for what we understand. We do. Or you won't understand the jargon of which somebody is speaking. It's always going to sound fanciful. Right? Life at the bottom of the sea sounded ridiculous till they dredged it up from the bottom of the sea. Documented thousands of species. Right? It was stupid to ever think bacteria and organisms live in the atmosphere. Until just 4 years ago? Right? 2 years ago, it was dumb to think any larger organisms could be up there. Or that there could be any life in space. All that's proven wrong now. Life is all over the place. It is. All over the place. They'll start talking about that too. They're going to get carried away as soon as they throw their opinions in there. They'll get carried away. But the point is this. We don't know all of what exists. But I can tell you this. By reading the prophecies of the Most High, we're going to find out a whole bunch of things that exist that we wish never woke up in the first place. And those without the Lord have no defense from such things. And there will come a time when things will torment men 5 months. They won't die. Men will seek death, and death will flee from them. They won't be able to die, but they will seek death for 5 whole months. Look, I was terribly sick for a week. I was in pain every single day one time. Anybody ever been like that? Just agonizing pain for a whole week. 5 months? No, thank you. No. But those are for the ones who don't have the seal of God on their foreheads. Which also tells you something else. See, you have the seal of the Holy Spirit. If you have the seal of God on your forehead, right? You were sent somewhere. Oh, we'll get back to that. Because you know what? There's so many things in Revelation that are just totally, absolutely, 100% confirmed in the Old Testament. Awesome. And they're starting to pop up here and there. Revelation is being given. It will blow your mind. It'll blow your mind. It'll blow your mind. John saw the truth. We have an issue with that, like the 144,000 sealed from the tribes of Israel. We say, well, it couldn't have been 144,000. That's what we say, because we forget. Where are they sealed at in their foreheads? What is the seal they receive in their forehead? The name of God, right? Who are these 144,000? The virgins. The virgins. These are virgins. They're not corrupted by woman. How do you not be corrupted by woman? Not corrupted by anything that gives birth. If you're not corrupted by a woman, not corrupted by anything that gives birth, surely you couldn't have been here. They are first fruits of God. Well, guess what? First fruits of God. Do you know what happens to a first fruit of God? It is plucked up before it ever gets started. Okay, I got to go here, guys. I'm going to say God bless everybody. Hopefully I can join you tomorrow. I'm doing some aggravating workings or things on the site. We're going to resume some things. I'm going to also give you guys an update. And some of you guys, the rest of you guys that are in Houston, we had a total of 64 people that wrote us back, and they were living in that area. God bless them. We still didn't find the one. Right? We thought we did. We didn't. That's okay. Still didn't find the one. But everything is in the Lord's hands. All right? Now, as far as I'm going to tell you guys something too. In Texas, they raised over $500 million already. I'm telling you now, there are going to be a lot of financial scams. There are some places, right, that they're going to have to be checked quadruple. Don't fall for the scams. All right. A lot of you guys are asking, is COT going to do something for the family members that lost something in Texas? Yes, we are. And we do as we do with those inside. But, you know, we have to take care of those who are in Texas who belong to COT first, okay? So when we start doing that, right, that's going to be special, disconnected from everything else. Because there are going to be some scams out there, and there's no way in the world that will be sanctioned here. Okay, we can't do that. You can't fall for that stuff either. Don't fall for that stuff. $500 million as of yesterday was sent there. That's a lot of money, $500 million. Okay? These people, when they come back after a few days, when it warms up and everything else, that's when they're going to need prayer. That's when they're going to need more support. A week and a half from now, that's when they're going to need housing again. The federal government's likely to step up with $100 million or $100 billion package. It's going to be a $100 billion plus package. It's going to have to be passed for this one because it's water damage. It's not like a storm blew some things over and left. This is water damage permeating. This is infrastructure. Sewage treatment plants damaged, oil refinery systems, electrical systems, buses and hubs and all that kind of stuff damaged. People's neighborhoods, some people can't come back. They didn't have insurance. They were low income. They didn't have an insurance. They didn't even have a car. They lost everything. Insurance is barely going to replace some things, and they need temporary places to stay during that time. They have children. The schools, they can't go back to their schools. They're going to have to move, register, and get all this stuff, and we know how expensive it is to jump out of one place and go to another. Right? We got a family right now in COT they went somewhere. They want to get back home to Houston, but they can't. Right? They do. You don't jump the gun. Like I told them, you don't rush and do things like that, because if you rush something like that without guidance from the Father, you're just going to waste your time, your money, and everything else. All right? Money won't solve everybody's problems. Prayer does, because that gives us right solution from the Father. All right? We were just shown that your stuff can do what? Can trap you in a flood. And we all know there's a deluge coming, and it's not water. There's a flood coming without water. Don't let your stuff trap you. You get your mind on stuff, that's when you become bitter at people. See, people lost their stuff, and they were worried about humanity, and that's why love was traveling in Texas. As soon as stuff is introduced and the money starts flowing, I'm telling you something, the momentum and the love will start going down as time goes forward. It's going to become old news. People are not going to want to hear it. They're going to print articles on who ripped this person off, who stole this. Crime is going to go back up and everything else. 2 days, it's about to be hot again in Houston, Texas. Certain people do go back to their homes, but they have no electricity, and it's going to stink. They will need certain things, but the federal government is providing a whole bunch. They're getting an influx of money. Other countries are giving to the U.S. specifically for those people. This is probably, they're going to receive more money than anybody of any natural disaster ever. But these people won't need it. But through our folks in COT who have been in there, we're going to know two things. Number one, are they really getting the help? Because we have some families right there in Houston. Right? Are they really going to get the help, or what? They're going to be a gauge for this thing, and then they're also going to be a gauge for the change in people. Certain things are expected. Emotions will run high when reality sets in and they realize they actually lost something. What's carrying them through right now, there are groups. See, it's easy when a lot of people are displaced, right? I'm telling you right now, it's so easy. It's very comforting to know everybody you're around is displaced. The problem is when everybody goes back to their individual places. And you're sitting there displaced and somebody else is not. And that's where the emotional issues will come from. All right? That's where you have to be strong for your fellow man also. You have to be strong in that area. All right? Christians fare well in a time like that where everybody is going through something together. It's the individualism. It's the individual lives that we live. Right? One up, one down. That's what we have an issue with. It's very difficult for a lot of people because they feel on their own again. Hopefully, they won't feel lonely. Hopefully, we can reach out during that time. Hopefully, we will have had some acquaintances that we can actually, at least by voice, right, by things, by diapers or whatever that we give them, that they can feel appreciated. They can feel like somebody's outfit, somebody's doing something for them. I know they're getting it now. It's not now that I'm worried about. It's when everybody disperses and goes back to their homes and the funding is cut off and everything else. That's the part, because this is going to take time for people to actually repair. We'll traumatize some folks, but it will also change many lives in a good way. Hopefully the nation learns from this concerning love itself, because that will lead them to Christ. If they truly learn about the love, they're going to learn about Christ. You can't separate the two. You can't do it. Faye says, yes, she saw that in Haiti. Yes, I've seen it a lot. I've seen that happen over and over again. It's a sad thing. It's even sad to say that, you would know how people are going to react a few weeks later. Right? It really is sad. But knowing that it's coming, we can also support our brothers and sisters by many means, right? But as far as the get your hands in the money situation and all that kind of stuff, but folks, unless it is a directive specifically for the families on a certain place in the sign-up page that everybody can look at, don't do it. Be very specific when you're doing that. Because there's going to be a lot of criminals out there. They're going to be just flat out criminal organizations and everything else. You're going to be shocked and surprised. All right? But a lot of money has been raised already. All right? And don't forget that your neighbor that lives right beside you. I know that people lost things in Texas, but don't you dare let your neighbor beside you starve, and then you go give your money to somebody else of whom somebody else is taken care of, and you let your next door neighbor starve. Don't do that either. That's wrong. That will be wrong. All right. I'm going to say God bless everybody. I'm going to join everybody tomorrow. God bless you guys greatly. God bless you greatly. I'll see you guys next time.